¿Qué hora es? Buenos días. Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos a los coloquios Curie. Este acto va a estar presidido por el vicepresidente del CSIC, el profesor Carlos Crosa. Por favor.
Hola, buenos días. Me han dicho que tengo que hablar en inglés, así que esto es lo único que vais a escuchar en castellano y vamos a cambiar rápidamente de idioma. So, thank you everyone for being here. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to have such a young audience. I know there are hundreds of students from Ramiro de Maeztu, which is the high school next to us, and we have a very special relation with this high school. So it's always nice to have them around and sharing our activities. And today is the last, I was told, is the last round of this series of talks that is organized jointly by 4 institutes here in the campus. And I think this is a very nice sample of cooperation among institutes that do different things, but at the end they can find some common ground and address topics that are relevant for all of us. So this is a kind of example that I would like really to push forward and to showcase to other institutes and other groups around the CSIC, because it's the kind of things it's worthwhile to make. For those of you who doesn't know or don't know the CSIC, this is the largest research institution in Spain. We are 14,000 people. It's very impressive. We are all over the country. We have 121 institutes which are located everywhere in the country, and we deal with basically all the areas of knowledge, and that includes from humanities to chemistry to astrophysics, whatever you may think of, we have it, with the only few exceptions of law and psychology, and not so much psychology. I think the only exception really is law. So we cover basically all the areas of knowledge, and that's a source of pride for us, because we offer really a structure that allows us to relate very closely to universities, and in that way to reinforce the basic structure of research in the country. And today, as I say, that will be my last point. We have the pleasure to have here the Professor Anthony J. Ryan from Sheffield University, which is a university I have some kind of very shallow link, but nevertheless a link, because I have one of my former students is now is lecturer there, a permanent lecturer there in the law department, surprisingly. And I took my PhD nearby Sheffield. I took my PhD in Hull, in Yorkshire. So we are kind of sharing similar lands, and in a way I think that gives some kind of character. Those who know Yorkshire will know what I am talking about. But anyway, Professor Ryan, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I will give now the floor to the presenter to introduce you properly, because I haven't done that. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much for the introduction. So on behalf of the Marie Curie Colloquia Committee, I would like to thank you for attending this session. Today would be the last session of this year, well, this academic year, let's say, well, during the previous sessions, we have the chance to debate with highly recognized researchers, as the one we have here today, of different disciplines, the latest research achievements and challenges that the finding and the research achievement may arise from them. We have been discussing in this Marie Curie colloquia about artificial intelligence, about climate change, about quantum information, so many very recent topics that probably are going to be very important in our near future. So this is really the aim of this colloquium initiative, is to communicate to society these findings and to let the society know how this finding may have some implication in your lives. So in this occasion, we bring here, I think, what is a nice example on how basic science, so the science that we scientists in this research institution do in the lab, can have a direct impact in the life of people, and in this particular case, in the life of people that it's in need. So it's a very nice way of showing that what scientists do has a direct impact in everyone's life. So the title of today's talk, you have it here, is it's Making Science Work for Refugees and Refugees Work for Science. It's quite appealing, really. And in this time, it's delivered by Professor Anthony Ryan from the University of Sheffield, as it has been already introduced. He's the professor of physical chemistry there, and is the founding director of the Grantham Center for Sustainable Futures. And this is a center that has projects covering many aspects of the UN's sustainability goals. And he leads the University of Sheffield program on sustainability, that it's a program that integrates many different disciplines, from pure science to sociology and to linguistics, as we have been discussing before. Well, besides this, Professor Ryan has been the head of chemistry in Sheffield University before becoming pro-vice chancellor there, and he has received many awards, including being named Officer of the British Empire for services to science. He's an excellent science communicator, and for us it's really a pleasure to have you here. So thanks very much for accepting this invitation and letting us know how your science can make important improvements in life conditions of people in need. So it's really an honor to have you here, and please, whenever you want.
So this is the only Spanish I'll say. Buenos dias. It's really nice to be here. I first visited this institute before many of the people in the middle section were born. There he promised me. Next slide. So my name's Tony Ryan, and I'm going to talk to you about making science work for refugees and refugees work for science. I could have given a different title, Polyurethanes as Synthetic Soils, Hydroponics in the Desert, but because we're trying to grow food where there is no means of growing food. And the reason I ended up doing this was because I went to the climate change talks in 2015. Again, lots of you were very young and might not have noticed them happening. I've worked in science communication, and if I come out here, can you hear? Is that okay? Can you still hear at the back? Yeah. Okay, because I am a professor. I'm used to talking to big groups. So, okay, so I went to the climate change talks in 2015, and on my way there was this dress, and the dress is on a model, and the dress is made from a UNHCR tent. Because you're recording and broadcasting to the other institutes. Okay, so I'm back here now. So the UNHCR dress is made from a UNHCR tent, which is iconic. And it was there because we'd come to realize that climate change drives mass migration. People move because the climate's changing, because of lack of water, because of lack of food, because of conflict over resources. At the climate change talks, I did various bits and pieces. Dressed a little bit smarter than today, ran a session on climate smart agriculture with colleagues from both Sheffield University and other universities. And the climate change talks, they're a massive jamboree. There's lots and lots of things going on. But in the background is the real hard work of making policy. So one of the things we were talking about was that the Earth has lost a third of its arable soil over the last 40 years. We're destroying our topsoil. And in destroying our topsoil, we're putting at risk future generations because of food security. So this guy, Duncan Cameron, is a soil biologist, and we came to work together because I ended up as a chemistry professor looking after biology. And we discovered a common interest. And the reason we have this common interest is that agriculture uses 70% of the world's fresh water. And if you're in an arid region, not unlike Madrid, then the supply of water is the limiting factor for food production. So any way of growing food using less water is good for the planet. So, I'm going to prove to you that I'm a professor, okay? So we're going to use hydroponics, and if you're teaching a subject, then you have to explain where the words come from, okay? So hydroponics is a combination of two Greek words. Hydro, water, and ponos, work. So hydroponics makes the water do the work that the farmer would normally do. And basically, to do hydroponics, you have something that supports the plant, called the substrate, and the roots go into the water, and the water contains everything the plant needs to grow: fertilizer, micronutrients, and the rest. And the important thing is that you can really minimize the use of water by controlling the way it circulates. So, production of food without soil is really common. So even here in Spain, last week, I was in Galicia, and I had a salad, and the tomatoes had clearly come from Holland. They were large, they were beautiful, and they didn't taste of very much. And I knew they were grown hydroponically for that reason. You can get beautiful looking and fine tasting tomatoes hydroponically, but if you sell them by weight, then often they don't taste very well. But the food quality can be the highest. And to make hydroponics work, there is no pointer. So what happens is the white bags you can see below the tomatoes, they contain mineral wool. And the little black pipes going into the bags, they drip nutrient solution into the bag at a rate that provides everything that the tomatoes need. And the tomato plants grow up, but actually they're on a string and they wind them down so that the ripe tomatoes are always at the right height for picking. And if you go to a big greenhouse, then the stalk of the plant is coiled on top of the bag as the plant is lowered down as it grows. And you can grow everything pretty much hydroponically. Lettuce, tomatoes, zucchini, aubergines, herbs. You can even grow onions, carrots, potatoes aren't so easy, cabbage is possible. And in growing this way, rather than growing in the open, you use 80% less water because you can circulate the water. You don't lose nutrients, so nutrients aren't leaking off a field into the waterway and causing pollution. You can get a much higher density of crops, so you get more food per unit land, and you can grow high-value crops. The problems are that the setup costs can be high. You need infrastructure, and you need technical knowledge. And you also need disease control. If you get a disease in a tomato factory like this, it wipes out the whole production. And you can't really grow base calories. So you can't really grow rice or wheat or potatoes. They really need to be done at scale in fields. But there are ways of improving that with the things we've learned from hydroponics. So just to give you an idea, I imagine you're Real Madrid supporters, or Atletico? Real, okay. How many people are in the stadium of Real? The capacity? 80,000, okay. So this stadium, Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield, holds 60,000, okay. And it's to scale next to the biggest tomato factory in the UK, okay. So just to give you an idea of scale. So this is a football stadium, about the same time as Real, and this is the tomato factory. And this is 90 hectares and grows 10% of the UK's tomatoes. And they're all grown in those white bags. So about 15 years ago, an architecture professor came to my office and said, we would like to put green roofs on buildings. We'd like to retrofit green roofs on existing buildings. But the substrate is too heavy. We need a lighter substrate. So I said, perhaps we can use polyurethane foam. It's light, it absorbs water. And then this is an experimental section of a green roof. So we made polyurethane foam, we put plants on it, alpine plants that would survive in Sheffield. And the project worked and we forgot about them. And then I went back to find them in the greenhouse and they were hidden behind in a corner of the yard, still there. The polypropylene trays that we'd made the foam in have degraded in the light, but the polyurethane's still there. And you can even see that the roots have penetrated all the way to the bottom here. So we knew it could work. So on the train on the way home from the climate change talks in Paris, notice the train on the way home, not the aeroplane. Then we designed a project to build the optimum polyurethane foam to grow plants. Because what we wanted to build was a farm in microcosm, a farm that made its own rain, that purified its own water. Because the water that falls as rain evaporated from the sea. Okay? So we want to desalinate water to make our own rain and build a greenhouse that's powered by the sun, that's in a place that's arid, next to the sea, use sunshine to desalinate water, and there's no soil because it's the desert, and we use polyurethane foam to make the desert. And then you can actually use really old technology from the Romans to do evaporative cooling. So if you put salt water onto fibers, onto fabric, and air blows through it, it cools the room. So you can cool the greenhouse and grow things when it's too hot to grow them outside. And it turns out that there's actually a company in Australia that tried to do this. This is technology that would work very, very well in Spain, in southern Spain in particular. So these are heliostat mirrors that focus the sun on a tower that contains molten salt. And the molten salt stores the heat so that it can drive a steam turbine that produces electricity 24 hours a day. And the steam turbine is used to distill the water. So this pool is actually a pool of concentrated brine because the fresh water has gone into the massive greenhouse. And this greenhouse produces 10% of Australia's tomatoes. It's called Sundrop Farms. So we started the project, and then the dress. Remember the dress? So the lady that had designed the dress said, I've been invited back to the refugee camp that the tent came from. And I can't help them, I'm a dress designer. So she said to the people in the UN, can I bring my pet scientist with me? I'm her pet scientist. And I went out there to see what was going on and what we could build. So here's a map of the refugee camp from the time I was there. It holds 80,000 people. There are 3,000 children a year born in the refugee camp. It's been there now for nearly 10 years. There are children who've grown up knowing nothing other than the refugee camp and its confines. It's both a sanctuary and a prison. So here's a picture from a drone. And the main gate, it's run by the Jordanian government and the UNHCR. There are armoured cars, there are guards, there's barbed wire. In fact, these things here are the armoured cars on the outside, initially to stop Syrians getting in, but now to stop refugees from getting out. This is where it is. Zaatari, it's 12 kilometres from the Syrian border. When I went in 2016, there was a full-on civil war. 12 kilometres was closer than the UK government was advising people to go. My wife sat over there. I didn't tell her how close it was to the Syrian border when I went, and I had a satellite phone in case I was abducted to call for support. It was kind of frightening on the first trip. It turns out now that it's really, really peaceful, and I regularly go there. So the people who live here used to live there, and they lived there in beautiful houses, and essentially they all had a farm around their house, because this is part of what's called the Fertile Crescent, where farming was invented. But now they live in these essentially packing containers, a whole family of 4, 6, 8 in a container. Like I say, it's a place of refuge, but it's also a prison, and they tell their story by the paintings on the wall. So the graffiti on the wall tells the story of the camp. And when we first went, water was delivered. 35 litres of water per person per day was delivered by truck. But things kind of would grow, but not very well. So it's a temporary camp. The refugees really want to go home, but can't, because they're political prisoners, essentially. In Jordan, they're illegal immigrants and can't work. They need a work permit. And the host community wants them to go home too, because they've sent the rents up, food prices up, and labour prices down. So it's a big social problem. And nothing that's permanent is permitted in the camp, because under Jordanian law, if you make a permanent residence, you own the land. And the police don't want them to own any land. They really suffered during COVID and still are suffering, as I'll show. However, life goes on. Okay, so I need to go back 2 slides to show you where this is. Okay. So this street here is known as the Champs-Élysées, because they have a sense of humour, and that's where all the shops are. And it's a hive of activity, because people are wanting to make a living, they're wanting to make a life. I've had bread from the shop. I've never escaped the people who kind of follow me around from the police long enough to have a haircut. I'd love to have a haircut in camp, because the Syrian barbers are fantastic. And it's full of beautiful kids. So this is a picture from my first visit. These 2 girls, in 2016, they'd heard that there was a fat English professor with a bag of sweets who was wandering around, and every time the car stopped, there they were. And they took me to see this lady. So this lady was called the Green Hand Woman. So what are you called in Spanish if you're good at growing things? In England, you have green fingers. The same? Okay, so in Syrian, in Arabic countries, it's green hands. So she has green hands. And look at what she can grow, hardly anything. And green's so important to her that she's bought some artificial grass to put round the stake that's holding up the veranda on her caravan. So green's really, really important. And then as we're driving round, this is kind of the corner of one of those white Land Cruisers that you see on the news. I spotted this green mesh. And the green mesh is what farmers use to protect plants from too much sun. So I knew there was something growing in there, okay? And a little kid appeared around this corner who I bribed with sweets. And then she took me in to see the garden. And more importantly, her father. And her father is really happy to show me his plants. None of these plants are growing in the ground. Each of these plants is in an oil drum. And the farmer had filled the oil drum with desert sand and then washed it with water. So as the water evaporates, it leaves a crust of salt behind, and he scrapes the salt off until the soil is free of salt enough to grow plants. And then he grew these plants. So I asked through an interpreter, where does the fertilizer come from? And he also kept doves, pigeons. And he used the pigeon excrement as fertilizer. And that's how he was able to grow things. So this is all happening, and I'm talking to the local people about, okay, well, you have 80,000 fertilizer factories, because each one of us is a fertilizer factory if we're prepared to collect the fertilizer, okay? But culturally, this is impossible. In the UK, about 1/3 of human excrement gets turned into fertilizer. I don't know what the numbers are in Spain. I guess I should have looked it up. But yeah, just not possible. And then they took me into a warehouse and said, we don't know what to do with these, okay? And these are mattresses that have been given to a refugee family, and then the refugee family's moved on or something's happened, and they've been taken back into store. But because of the rules and regulations, they're not allowed to give them out again. Okay? So I sent home to my biology colleagues the most excited WhatsApp message I've ever sent. I know exactly what we can do. So I'll tell you what we did after I tell you about a bit of science. So this guy, Harry Wright, got his PhD in 2020. We have a lot of funding now for horticulture research at the university, and he runs his own project with a local company on recycling polyurethane, as well as continuing to design. So why would you use polyurethane foam? And by the way, if you don't know what polyurethane foam is, it's highly likely you woke up this morning laying on it, and the cushion on the seat that you're sat on is made from it. So it's material that you see all over. And the current hydroponic growing media are either glass wool or clay beads, or even some organic wood chip or coconut coir. That's the shells of coconuts. These come with risks of pathogens. These are essentially high greenhouse gas producing industrial products. So in the Netherlands, there are 60 square kilometres of greenhouse. 60 square kilometres of greenhouse, using bags of mineral wool to grow fruit and vegetables. And after each growing season, the mineral wool is clogged with roots and useless. So it goes to landfill. So there are landfill mountains. And mineral wool is exactly what it says. It's made from rock. So you take rock and you melt it at 2,000 degrees and then extrude it into fibers that are collected, and then they're sold to people who run greenhouse farms, to a local. You would be able to buy this to use in your garden if you so wished, and it goes to waste. There've been a number of people, a number of companies who've tried to replace mineral wool because it's made from rock and it's so cheap. The company that makes it, when there's a competitor, they drop the price. They turn that company out of business, and then they raise the price again. So it's a really difficult business to break into. So we take polyurethane foam. So for those of you who are chemists, you'll recognize something with hydroxyl groups and isocyanates and water. We mix them together, and hey presto, we make foam. So inside the cushion that you're sat on are pieces of polyurethane, the struts, and then there are holes, and 97% of the cushion is air, and only 3% is polyurethane, rubber, essentially. Caoutchouc. Is that right? Caoutchouc. There you go, that's what it is. Okay. And then inside this material, the molecules, the organic molecules, separate to make this structure that gives the material its flexibility. And this is what I did my PhD on 40 years ago. So it's a really versatile material. And by changing the ingredients, we can change its density, we can change how big the cells are, we can change how much water it holds, we can change how fast air flows through it, which tells you how open the cells are. We can add additives, clay, to change the pH and how it buffers cations and anions, because that's important for the plant. So we did an experimental design and used machine learning to design an optimum polyurethane material. So basically, you set up a mathematical model that predicts the physical property as the sum of various interactions between the ingredients, and you get a prediction, in this case, of the density that you can compare to the observed density. So we do a reasonable job of predicting the density, and then how the various ingredients interact is shown by these yellow and blue bars. The detail's unimportant. I just want you to know that behind the design of the polyurethane is a mathematical model. And it predicts the cell size. So you change the ingredients, a catalyst, a couple of surfactants. You can change the predicted cell size and compare it to the observed cell size. And you can get a really, really wide range, a factor of 2 in how big the cells are. You can predict the water holding capacity. Again, a much better prediction of the water holding capacity, ranging from 20% of the volume to 97% of the volume of the foam. And you can even predict how fast the water droplets are absorbed by the foam, so how fast the water goes in the foam. And this is really important for germination. So Harry had produced a mathematical model to predict the properties of a polyurethane based only on the ingredients. If somebody had told me at the beginning of his PhD that that would be possible, I wouldn't have believed them, because it's so complicated and it's always been a craft skill. So, maybe I need to... Okay, it won't play again, but you saw the plants growing, right? The little time lapse. When we do plant studies, we only take the plant to a small height because you get enough data. And then we look inside the foam to see what's happened. This isn't spaghetti. These are the roots of the plants. And this plant's decided that the foam is too small, and so it's made its own holes in the foam. And researchers get very attached to their plants. So we never grow them to fruit, or we don't grow them to fruit very often. So Harry took one of his plants home, so it had been germinated in this piece of polyurethane, and then transplanted into this bigger piece of polyurethane, and then put in a whole plant pot, and eventually filled the window of his kitchen. So then the challenge is, okay, so now you can predict the properties of the polyurethane. Can you predict from the properties of the polyurethane how well the plants grow? So again, set up some mathematical model with now the properties of the foam, the density, the cell size, how fast the water goes in, how much it holds, and how open the cells are, and try and predict from the properties the growth of spring onions. And we use spring onions because they grow quickly, okay? And you can grow them to full height in less than 6 weeks. So you need to know, for example, how much chlorophyll there is. So we developed a photographic method for measuring chlorophyll content. And again, how much dry mass, how big the plant is, prediction versus observation, model prediction versus observation, it works. How much chlorophyll there is in the plant, it works. And I have a whole other stack of plant properties, but you get the message, right? He's built a model that allows you to take a recipe for a plastic, and from the recipe for that plastic, predict how well a plant will grow in that piece of plastic foam. Absolutely amazing. So, back to the refugee camp. The PhD's worked. We can design for a farmer a polyurethane foam that's optimized for that plant, whether it's a spring onion, a lettuce, a tomato, an aubergine, for that plant. So here's a piece of my Zaatari mattress foam. This is the dress designer and a filmmaker that we took with us on the trip. So what we did was we grew tomatoes in that foam. So I think you can see it's the same piece of foam. You can read the writing here. I brought it back in my hand luggage. The plant technician chopped it up, germinated tomatoes in it, and you can see the roots have escaped into the water that does the work. Hydroponic. So before I take an old mattress and get people to grow tomatoes in it that they will feed to their children, I need to know that nothing nasty is coming out of the foam, okay? So one of the things that's often in polyurethane foam is tin as a catalyst. I don't want to be feeding people tin. So we did mass spectroscopy and other things to make sure there was no tin. They also have a brominated fire retardant. I wanted to make sure there was no bromine in there. So we grew plants to fruit and tested the fruit and the leaves and compared them to fruit and stalks that we'd bought in a supermarket and in a organico shop. And the fruit with the highest heavy metal content were from organicos, because they use sewage sludge as fertilizer, and sewage sludge contains heavy metals. Whereas the stuff that's grown hydroponically was absolutely clean. So then we go out to the refugee camp. So there's a fat English chemistry professor and a PhD student trying to teach Syrian farmers how to grow things. It ain't going to work, okay? And essentially, it didn't. The next time we went back, everything had grown dusty. But the third time we went back, they'd built one of these. So up here, this is a tank with the water and the fertilizer. And these are drain pipes that have been reused. So every piece of this equipment had been something else. So everything's recycled. Pieces of tent frame, drain pipe, pieces of polyurethane foam. You can even see a piece of tent on the top of the greenhouse, and some polyethylene film to protect it from the wind. And then I couldn't get funding to do this anymore, so we had to kind of go out and raise some money. And I kept on getting photographs of things growing, tomatoes, lettuce. This guy, he's called Abu Wissam, Ahmad Abdel Rahim Al-Zubi. He's the green hand man. Okay, he's my age, pretty much. And I have at least 1,000 WhatsApp pictures like this, next to something he's grown, and that's our only language. Okay? And the thing that made the difference was this guy. He doesn't smile very much. He's very serious. Okay? And his name is Moyed Al-Mesalmani, and he is a Syrian farmer. He's a wheat breeder who was expelled from Syria for being on the wrong side of the civil war. And he ended up in Sheffield when I was Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Vice President. Okay? And so we put him to work because it turned out that not only was he a wheat breeder, but he had a master's degree in hydroponics. So we put him to work working with the Syrian farmers, and essentially we run the research by WhatsApp. So his research tool is his mobile phone, and he exchanges WhatsApp messages with groups of farmers in many refugee camps now that are run by the UNHCR. So yeah, always, so this is the symbol of the research. So we've trained more than 1,000 people, and the model is we've trained the trainers. So rather than it being a white chemistry professor, it was then a Syrian wheat breeder, and now it's the refugees that do the training themselves. So we've trained the trainers, and once you've convinced a Syrian farmer that you can grow things in polyurethane form, and that Syrian farmer is eating the results and sharing the results with his family, he or she will then teach their friends and relations. And so we've funded the training opportunity via this project called Green Beds, because we've turned mattresses into gardens. So, happy cabbages, beans, which I've learned are called fool. I really discovered what co-creation means. So what's really important is how good are the roots. If the root quality is good, then the plant's going to be good. Okay, and the way it works is if you do training, you get a starter kit, and a starter kit is a plastic box, some foam, and some seedlings, and fertilizer solution. And then you come back to show the team what you've grown, and then you get more seedlings and more fertilizer. And every time people come back, we get shown new things. So if you're an Arab, then you would drink mint tea. Very, very popular. Okay? And for them, mint tea is black tea with a piece of fresh mint in the tea. Okay? So this guy turns up with this object. Okay? So he's taken a yogurt pot, and he's taken the pump from a soap dispenser. Okay? So now, every time he takes a piece of mint to make his guest's tea, he pushes the dispenser and circulates the fertilizer solution around. That does two things. Okay? It provides fresh fertilizer solution to the root, but it also keeps the water oxygenated. Because if there's no oxygen in the water, the roots die. So then, just before COVID, I got a WhatsApp message, and they try and keep things a secret from me, so I get surprised when I get there. But I got a WhatsApp message saying, time to harvest the lettuce. So here's a row of lettuce. So this is Moda. This is a young lady called Maya. She's a University of Sheffield employee in Jordan. And Abu Wissam, And this guy, this is Ali. And it's from Ali's falafel shop. Okay. So they take the lettuce to Ali's falafel shop. They collect tomatoes. Take tomatoes to Ali's falafel shop. And he prepares me the best falafel sandwich I've ever had. For a whole variety of reasons. Not only was it really, really tasty, but the refugees had grown the lettuce and the tomatoes and the spring onions in the falafel sandwich in polyurethane foam. That is research in action. So they've grown all sorts of things. Here's chilies, right? So Hannah's showing me a chili that's just about to ripen. Just like Professor Haig, who doesn't like PET bottles of water, they actually pickled chilies and put them in PET bottles for me to bring home. Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. They were taken off me at the airport because you're not allowed to get on the aeroplane with pickled chilies like that. So here's my friend Abu Wissam. Okay, so Abu Wissam always wears his Grantham Centre t-shirt when I come because you know we're going to have a photograph taken, and he's giving the big thumbs up. Okay, and sometimes if there's no guards around, he'll let me ride his bike. So I get to ride his bike through the refugee camp on the way to lunch. And he's always got new things to show me, always. He's learned something, he's worked something out himself, and it allows us to do dirty hydroponics. It can be in the open, the greenhouse isn't ultra hygienic, you don't have to wipe your feet or wear a hat, and everything works. And I took a film crew with me who made a film for the BBC, and I got a little extra. My mate, Abu Wissam, I had in a box that said, happy at work. Okay? I'd ignored refugee camp. I'd ignored he had a big, beautiful house with olive groves and a farm because he was an engineer in Syria. And all I saw was this. But he lives in a metal box that he's tried to make as homely as possible for his wife and 2 daughters. He's my age, his wife's my wife's age, his daughters are my daughter's age. I was absolutely devastated, and still am. Sorry, can't quite ever get past that bit. I rang home because I'd not seen the humanity of the problem. Not only do all these people have to live like this because of climate change and the conflict it causes, but we too could have to live like this. So in lockdown happens, pandemia was a big issue for us, okay? But they kept on growing things. In fact, they had nothing else to do. They couldn't get out. So they grew more and more. So this is the back of someone's caravan, the box they live in, where this fella's growing lettuces, someone else has set up a little tomato factory adjacent to his caravan. For Eid, the celebration after Ramadan, Abu Wissam and Moda sent me a photograph of a big harvest of tomatoes to celebrate. Back in November 21, I went back for the first time after the lockdown, after the pandemic, to meet the Abus. Okay, so this is Abu Wissam, this is Abu Muhammad, and this is Abu Marwan. So you learn things all the time. And I said to Moyed, why are all these guys called Abu? What's so special about Abu? And Abu is what your name changes to if you are a father. Okay? So, Abu Wissam is not called Wissam, his son's called Wissam. Abu Muhammad's not called Muhammad, his son's called Muhammad. And Abu Marwan is not called Marwan, his son's called Marwan. I don't know their real names, I just know them as Abu. They've built a nursery, so we used to have to buy seedlings in the market, but now we have our own seedlings. Abu Wissam has started to grow crocuses to harvest saffron. So now we can make a saffron harvest. Saffron's really expensive. If you can grow saffron like this, then you can start to make a living for your family. You can generate a livelihood. So yeah, so Abu Wissam now runs the nursery. So here's his first saffron crop. And then because you need to keep the roots aerated, if you're growing lettuce or beans on a floating platform, then they built some little machines to splash the water around just to get some oxygen into the water. I got taken for lunch at Abu Marwan's house, and here is Marwan giving me the message, thumbs up. I'd got over now the way they have to live and had a beautiful lunch in their caravan together. I can't show you, Maya's quite happy to have her picture taken, but I can't show you the pictures of his wife and daughters because I wasn't allowed to take them, being culturally sensitive. But beautiful kids, really, really well educated. A 16-year-old girl who's taught herself to read and write Korean from the internet, right? Really, really beautiful, clever people. And then, remember this girl? In 2021, she was in the same place in the refugee camp. Didn't remember me, but clearly the same girl. And I don't know what her future holds. But I do know that hydroponics has really made a profound effect to the people in the refugee camp because it's now in the murals. So the murals have the solar panels that provide them with electricity, the tents that have been replaced by the metal boxes called caravans, and a picture of our hydroponics facilities. And when visitors arrive to the refugee camp, this is what they see, and there's a demonstrator hydroponics facility next door. What it doesn't do is allow you to grow all your own food. What it does do is improve your mental health and well-being, because these are farmers. They want to have green things, and they want to teach their children the culture of growing. And that's actually, for them, I think, the most important thing. But for us in Sheffield, the most important thing is we can now do dirty, low-cost hydroponics because we've learnt from the Syrian farmers how to do it. So now, in Sheffield, we have basically what would be an anathema to a commercial farmer. So there's no door where you have to don a suit and a hat. You can just walk in. A month before we came here, there was a collection of 396 experimental lettuces. Okay, because they're experimental, you're not allowed to sell them or eat them. So the ethics form said we'd sent them to the biodigester for biodigesting, but I brought 100 lettuces home and went up and down the street handing out lettuces to my neighbours because that's what the Syrian farmers do. They feed their friends with the things that are grown hydroponically. So what started as high-tech foam in Sheffield ended up as low-tech hydroponics in the refugee camp, and then has come back to Sheffield and informs all of our research now. So there's been a really positive research benefit from going out there and doing the work. So there have been all sorts of people involved and all sorts of people funding it. We had a visit just before lockdown of one of the colleagues from this institution, from CSIC, Ángel Marcos Fernandez, who sat there. He developed some foam that's now being used to test the biodegradation of polyurethane, but I thought it was a bit too much detail for today. But thank you to Ángel and all the other people involved. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Okay. Hello. Thank you very much. Really nice, really inspiring, and a lot of science that applied. I really enjoyed that. So that's the first thing. Then, is fouling a problem, and how do you deal with fouling?
Fouling?
Yeah.
By fouling, you mean the growth of algae on top?
Yes.
Okay, very
and
easy.
on the bottom, and yeah.
So you keep light away.
Yeah.
So if there's no light, then the biofilm can't photosynthesize, and you get no biofilm. Okay. So if you're growing lettuces, then basically you have a floating platform. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you have a piece of foam that floats on top of the solution. The roots go through a very small hole into the solution, so there's nowhere for a film to form. If you're growing tomatoes, then basically you take a piece of black plastic and just cover the top of whatever they're growing in, so there's no light, so you don't get algae. Fouling really is a problem, and you have to, and as long as you keep the light away, no photosynthesis, no fouling.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. This was a very nice talk, and you have a very great ideas, and I think that you do a fantastic job. My question is concerning microplastics and nanoplastics.
Okay.
You don't say nothing. I am doing research about that. I am from Mexico. My name is Ana. I am working here in the museum, looking for micro and nanoplastic in Antarctica.
Okay.
So I know that they are everywhere.
Yep.
The thing that we don't know is if they are dangerous or not for humans. And I don't know if they go to the tomatoes and then go to our food. And I don't know if you have some information about that.
Okay, so I can absolutely answer that question. So polyurethane is really easy to find in a plant. So by fluorescence microscopy. So we've looked and there are no microplastics coming through the roots, up the vascular system of the plant and into the fruit. Okay, so I don't think that's an issue. Okay, whether the fruit gets contaminated with airborne microplastic later is another problem. I'm really pleased that you said that we don't know whether microplastics are a problem or not. Okay, it may just be that microplastics are another form of dust. And carry the same problems as dust. If I was really, the one form of microparticles that I'm concerned about are actually the particles from diesel combustion. So there's far more particles from diesel combustion than there are plastic microparticles. And also microparticles from tire wear, because there are also far more of those. So we do look, but as you can tell, looking and being concerned that they're there is one issue. Knowing that they're a problem for human health is another issue. They certainly are a problem for animal health. and I think we need to take that into consideration too.
I really enjoyed the presentation, and I was just curious to know, you said that they couldn't live off the production, but like what percentage of what they consume is made with the technique?
Okay, so for a family, you could grow with something this size. You could feed a whole family with salad, tomatoes, aubergines, cabbage. Okay, what you couldn't feed them with is bread, rice, pasta. Okay, so most of your calories come from carbohydrate. Yeah, but the part of your diet that's fresh fruit and vegetables, a family could grow in something this size, but that doesn't generate a livelihood. So we are actually, the next stage of this is to build commercial scale farms that are owned and operated by the refugees, so that then they can produce on a commercial scale and sell. So that's, but all your fruit and veg.
Hi, I really enjoyed the talk. I think it's really inspiring. And my question is about something you said earlier. You said these seeds we're sitting on right now are made out of the polyurethane foam you use to grow those plants. So could you turn this into a garden if you wanted to?
Sure. One of the slides I took out was just before the pandemic lockdown. Okay, so on the 24th of March, we had a 96 plant experiment running in the greenhouse, and we had to close the greenhouse down. So I brought 12 tomato plants home, okay, in polyurethane foam. Okay, my wife's, she sat here, she will tell you, I can grow nothing. I've never grown anything, okay? And even I could use WhatsApp, because I couldn't go talk to the people. Even I could use WhatsApp to find out what was going wrong with my plants and how to correct it. So I managed to grow tomatoes during the lockdown in our house using a piece of foam. And yes, you could take an old mattress and start to grow things in your garden. It would work. Problem is you don't know where the foams come from. Yeah, you know. The stuff we make doesn't have any of those nasty things in, but absolutely possible. You could go home and do this today if you have green fingers. Do you have green fingers? Yes. Then do it.
Yeah, thanks for the talk and for the work. I was curious, where is the fertilizer coming from? Is this working?
The fertilizer.
Do you bring it in, or do you use that pigeon poo, or?
No. So we absolutely don't use pigeon poo, but some now in the camp, because it's grown and grown and grown. So the police, are there any policemen in here? Okay, the police will not allow us to take solid fertilizer into the refugee camp, because you can make bombs from solid fertilizer, okay? They will allow us to take liquid fertilizer into the refugee camp. So we buy liquid fertilizer because the police haven't realized that if you let it evaporate, it makes solid fertilizer, okay? So we've not told them about that, and we can take liquid fertilizer in. You can, in the market, you know, in the towns and cities in Jordan, you can buy NPK fertilizer really easily. And the micronutrients that are needed for specific plants as additions are also available in liquid form. So we bring into the camp liquid NPK fertilizer and liquid micronutrient dressing for whatever plants being grown.
And that's brought in with money from the project, not the farmers buying.
Okay, so the money we've raised in Sheffield from our alumni essentially pays for those consumables. But what happens is, once people have got successful, they've learned how to grow things. There's a real black market in the camp, so pretty much everything's available. So solid fertilizer comes over the fence during the night time, and there are some refugees who have quite big scale production now for themselves and to sell. But you absolutely need NPK fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations again.
Hi, Tony. Thank you so much for this beautiful example of how just to get this feedback with your research. That's basically what we do here. And actually just to be active and to have these cooperations. You mentioned that you have to raise your own funding. So, but was there at the starting point of the project, there was you apply like in a usual proposal or something? How did it work at the beginning?
Let me see if... I'm just seeing if the photo's there. No, okay. The first visit, I funded myself, okay? And maybe the second visit as well. And then the third visit, when I realized something was happening, I went to the president of the university and said, this can be a really good story for you, okay? And so then the president of the university gave me £50,000 that funded us for a year. I applied for a big research grant, and the referees' comments were, this is not research, they are only trying to help people, do not fund. Okay? So then, American universities run on philanthropic donations from their graduates. So we went to the University of Sheffield graduates and said, we're doing this project with refugees that uses science from the university, can you help us? And through that we raised £300,000, and that's kept the project running, and it pays my head salary, and it pays for kind of the costs in camp, and it pays for us to visit. And that'll get us through about 5 years. I have a big bid in at the moment with another foundation to build farms for workers' cooperatives.
That was my following question. Which were your short-term future plans for the project?
So this microcosm farm was built in Oman, and it was funded by the British Council. Okay, and you can see the Oman is in the microcosm farm, and the guy on the end is the British ambassador. Okay, so we do get some support from the UK government, but to do this at scale will be basically a bunch of dot-com billionaires. So kind of using their money to build at scale. And one of the things I was doing this morning was exchanging emails with people about a bid. Basically, I want to just, it works now. Here's a farm, get on with it, build a life, and I can retire.
Hi, my name is Emma, and thank you for your presentation. It was super interesting. And I don't know much about science, but I really wanted to know how you mentioned that that the BBC made a documentary about it, and I wanted to ask what's the name of the documentary,
okay.
and how did it give this project any exposure, and did it help you get funds and everything. So,
No,
yeah.
it did. It has led to funding. Do you have your phone with you?
Oh yeah.
Search for BBC Desert Garden, and it should just come up. A little 8-minute film, but I can send you a link. In fact, it's on the bottom of my email. Found it? BBC Desert Garden.
Ah, okay. This is okay. Yeah, we found it.
Okay, and just so you know that I do start crying in that film as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to ask, like for vegetables that they grow in the roots, maybe potatoes or carrots, do you use the same system or it's different?
So it's a very good question, and I must say you are the politest audience I've ever presented to. Yes, depending on what you're growing, you have to kind of modify how it works. So for lettuce, you have a piece of foam that floats and the roots go into the water. For cabbage, then the root needs to be able to penetrate, but the plant is above. And for onions, yeah, again, you have what they're called Dutch buckets for some reason. I don't know why they're called Dutch buckets, but you have a bucket that has whatever the substrate is in, and then you drip water in. But again, the majority of the plant is above. If you want to grow root vegetables, then the root has to be able to push the substrate out of the way. And then we use either shreds of plastic or clay balls. But actually, shredded PET bottles works really, really well. So there are ways of doing it. Potatoes, never been successful. But if anyone can do it, the Syrian farmers will manage to find a way.
Thank you. Congratulations for this excellent talk. I'm polite. As far as I know, Israel has developed very powerful technologies for growing plants in very harsh conditions.
Yeah.
Do you know if they use similar technology?
Absolutely they do, yeah. So there's nothing new here, really. Well, no, there is. The new thing is being able to do it dirty. Okay, so if you go to a hydroponic farm in Holland or a hydroponic farm in Israel, when you go into the greenhouse, there's like a sticky mat as if you're going into a clean room to take pathogens from your shoes, and you have to wear one of those kind of white suits and a hairnet so that you don't introduce disease into the greenhouse. Okay, so and that's how. But otherwise, the technology is the same as I've described. Okay, you deliver nutrient solution, you have a substrate. Again, in the Israeli, well, in the greenhouses I know about in hot countries, they use mineral wool. They have evaporative cooling, like we did, all the things we developed. But it's pristinely clean. Okay, because if you get a disease in, then the disease just takes the whole plant. So one of the things, the Syrians worked out how to do it dirty. They use some organic materials. They use kind of a brew they make from onion skins and garlic to ward off some pests. They allow some fouling. Okay, so then you get a microcosm. You get a microbiome colonizing the foam. And then the microbiome is there then that outcompetes the disease, right? So then the disease doesn't take hold because the friendly bacteria are actually stronger than the disease bacteria, and that's how plants often work in synergy with the microbiome in the soil. So we've also been working on introducing a microbiome an artificial microbiome into the soil that's known to protect tomatoes, for example, from disease. That's not been successful to date, but we're trying all of those things in order to take away. So the biggest part of the cost is keeping the greenhouse clean. If you can run a dirty greenhouse, you can run a cheap greenhouse. So that's what we've learned from the Syrians.
And just for curiosity, which is the current situation of the refugee camp? Is it expected to change in the close future? Or?
So in Amman is the capital of Jordan. There's a refugee camp from 1948 that's actually now part of the city. Okay, the refugees in Azraq and Zaatari cannot go home for political reasons. President Assad has been rehabilitated to a certain extent by the Arab community, so he was at the Arab League last week. So they're not going home. But there's a lot of donor fatigue, right? So there's a new crisis and a new crisis and a new crisis. And this crisis kind of gets left behind. So the aid agencies are pulling out. So now it's really important that some livelihood activity and some resilience is built up in this refugee camp, because it's actually the 5th biggest town in Jordan. Okay, so the town next to it, called Mafraq, is smaller than the refugee camp. Okay, and we've been working with the university that lies in between the refugee camp and the town in order to build that resilience.
Okay, thank you and congratulations.
I think maybe, okay, with last question.
Hi, I'm Ines. Thank you very much for your talk. Regarding the UN climate conferences you attended to and comparing them to your own personal experience in the refugee camp, do you believe that science could actually help outrage the political barriers that these refugees are facing and will face in the future as an international organization?
Okay. Tough question. Tough question. So every little thing helps. Okay, so in terms of geopolitics, I don't think we're going to be able to do anything. For future generations of potential refugees, working to combat climate change, I think, is really important, because climate change will absolutely drive mass migration. Okay, so the science research to mitigate and slow down climate change is important. Every little helps at the small scale, right? Providing people with a bit of science that can help their well-being and personal feelings, and generate a little bit of happiness in a situation that's really bad helps. And I think the feedback thing, benefits refugees, because we've had the feedback into our research. Yeah, that's got quite a bit of interest, and now there's a big donor who will build something to transform the lives of those refugees that we've trained to be farmers. So it all joins up. But yeah, scientists aren't going to solve the refugee problem, but they can help a little bit with refugees.
Okay, thank you.
Tough crowd.
So I think we have the last question.
The last question.
Thanks so much for this nice talk. I wonder if you know about the Great Green Wall initiative.
I do, yeah.
Okay, I would like to know your opinion about this initiative and its feasibility.
Okay, so the Great Green Wall is to grow trees in the Sahara to stop the Sahara expanding. And anything that stabilizes the vegetative zone around a desert will stop its encroachment. So yeah, the Great Green Wall, I think it needs help in terms of how the root zone of the trees is managed. We've talked a lot about using, there's the dilemma, right? So what do you use to stabilize the soil and prevent water loss, okay? And the answer is polyurethane and plastic sheets, okay? But then that causes all sorts of issues with environmental pollution, microplastics, and kind of managing that dilemma is really important. But no, the Great Green Wall is you know, making, generating soil in the desert is the way to stop the desert, at the periphery of the desert is the way to stop the desert expanding. I've not managed to get anything funded in that area, but it's something we've thought about quite a bit.
Okay, so I think we can conclude here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.